Hi, everybody. Welcome again to our second YouTube VATRE information session. Since we had the first one, we've gotten more questions in from the community, so we want to cover some of those today. I'm back with Superintendent Dr. Christy Whitbeck and Deputy Superintendent Steve Bassett. They're going to go over kind of an overview of what is this VATRE. Some people call it VATRE. It's VATRE. However you pronounce it, we want to inform you about what it is.
Absolutely. Tomato, but here's what you need to know. Just a quick version from both Steve Bassett and myself. So what it is it's a voter-approved tax election. So anytime that we need to change the tax rate from what's being proposed, we must go to the voters. And in this case, it is to add money to our maintenance and operations portion of the tax rate. What we intend to do with our funds is to add police officers to our elementary schools, which has been a lot of outcry from our community since Uvalde. But we really want to take care of our teachers and our staff and look at their compensation. And we are so fortunate in Fort Bend ISD to talk about the programs of choice that we have. As a matter of fact, I was just visiting with a lot of economic development people that are looking at bringing their companies to the area. And I was bragging on 245 fine arts programs, 18 athletic sports, 7 different academies, early college, high school, a career tech center, 14 pathways in our CTE center, including this one for audiovisual. We just offer so many things, and there's a price tag that goes with that, but it is our intention to maintain those. On this slide, everyone is familiar with the right-hand side bonds. We've had lots of bonds in the history of Fort Bend ISD due to the amazing growth over the last decades. But what we're not as familiar with is the left-hand side, and that's the VATRE, and that's where we're talking about the general fund and how that affects our proposed tax rate. So what is it needed for? Just a very important fact that has really emerged in the last few years, that there's been an increase in special education children across our nation and our local area. We've gone from about 6.5% to 12% identified children, and we're currently spending $36 million more to educate a special education child than what we receive from the state. We've also been cut in some other areas like instructional materials, which would be like textbooks, some technology, which would be the ways in which we purchase software, as well as iPads, laptops, things of that nature. We haven't had a change since 2019. And of course, we're dealing with inflation like everyone else. We drive the circumference of the earth equivalency every day in our buses. So we've definitely been hit by that.
Every time I hear that, I'm astounded. We're driving the circumference of the earth. On the $36 million for special education, could you or Steve address how would a successful election and $47 million more dollars coming to the district, how would it address that $36 million in special education?
Because of the deficit that we've had, a big chunk of the deficit we have is from this $36.1 million from the special ed students, and we do need to continue to hire special ed teachers as we continue to grow in that area. And we don't want to turn any child away. We can't turn any child away. I mean, we have to be able to provide these services. And so receiving these funds through the election are really going to make a big difference in that area, along with the rest of the district.
And one of the other key points that is causing the need for this election is that the state is mandating that we drop the tax rate 5.5 pennies. In the maintenance and operations. And that part is the critical part for you to understand that that's how we pay salaries, that's how we buy our utilities, that's how we buy all the things in the building. This is critical. And so they're forcing that drop. And then that's going to come up in a moment in a clear explanation. But this is a myth that I think our community really needs to understand. Everyone knows their property taxes have gone up because their property is worth more, 15%. So that $100,000 property is now worth about $115,000. And so everyone is facing those higher bills, and so they wonder, what percentage is the district getting out of that to support the general fund? And the answer, shockingly to people, is none. Most people think that can't be possible because they're writing their checks to FBISD. But this slide kind of shows you that while more money comes in the door, which is on the green side, then we are reduced that much going out the back door. We don't receive other money that the state would normally give us. And so that's critical in that money is not staying with us. As I switch over to Steve, I just want to point out, we've got the two parts of the tax rate, the biggest part being in the maintenance and operations, which is what the VATRE is all about. And then we have our sustaining the tax rate on our interest and sinking fund, and that is the $1.21 total. And basically what we're asking is to keep our tax rate at $1.21. And that's a good segue for me to slide over to Steve.
Dr. Whitbeck mentioned this in terms of, so how do we go from $1.21 to $1.21? The biggest piece of it is the state mandated reduction, so 5.5 pennies. And we do benefit from the general fund on the debt side. When you talk about the higher property value growth, we do benefit from that on the debt side of our two funds. Not on the general fund side, which pays all the salaries, but we do benefit on paying off bonds. So we think that we can reduce that rate by 2 pennies. So you have the $1.21 minus 5.5 minus the 2 pennies, and then we're asking our voters to be able to keep the 7.5 pennies in the M&O rate, and that's how we end up at the total of $1.21. So there's been some questions about recapture, okay? And so just want to be able to address this. And if we have a successful election, we're going to be able to have 7.5 pennies more in our M&O tax rate. Now this is where it starts to get complicated. 2 of them are golden pennies, which are not subject to recapture. 5.5 of them are copper pennies, which are subject to recapture. So there's a lot going on in here, but you can see the reason why golden pennies are called golden pennies is that not only are we collecting the local funds and we're able to retain those funds for the district, the state actually, in our case, almost matches those dollar for dollar. And so by getting these 2 golden pennies into our tax rate, the state is actually paying us more to the tune of $9.7 million more per year. And that $9.7 million is part of the $47 million overall impact that a successful VATRE will have. And so golden pennies, and all districts have access to some golden pennies, and the state is actually putting more money into the school districts with the more golden pennies that they have. So we have 2 more golden pennies available to us, and that's the purpose of this election, getting those 2 golden pennies. Now, the other side of it is the copper pennies. So we would be adding 5.5 copper pennies. Now those copper pennies, they are actually subject to recapture. So what is recapture? Recapture goes back to the Robin Hood concepts from the late 70s, early 80s, where if you have districts with higher property values, the state wants to be able to divert some of those funds to the districts with lower property values. And so in our case, we haven't paid recapture before, but we would only be paying recapture on these 5.5 pennies. And so that equates to about $2 million a year. So what's the net impact of this? And this is where, I think there's a lot of confusion. But, while we will have recapture, that is way more than offset by the new state revenue that we'd be getting of 9.7. So the net impact of the VATRE is to have 7.7 million more from the state, okay? 9.7 that they'd be sending us, 2 million that would be in recapture. And that's all part of the $47 million that we would be provided. Okay. It's also important to note that recapture is not permanent. People say, well, you'll be there forever. No. If we continue to have property enrollment growth that we've had, that'll help. We do expect property value to slow down with potential recession. So if just those 2 things happen, we could exit recapture. But also if the state does increase the basic allotment, that'll also help us exit recapture.
Steve, before we leave this topic of recapture, I want to see if I can clarify something.
Mm-hmm.
So you say with the golden pennies, they're golden because we get money from the state and we get to collect more from local taxes.
Right.
But previously you said when the property values increased, we don't get any of that increased local tax money from the result of increased property values.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's on the base part of our tax rate, so we're talking about all of these enrichment pennies that the state allows us to get. And so it is definitely confusing, okay, and I understand that. But being able to increase state revenue is one of the main reasons why we're having this election. But it's also one of the reasons why you see the ballot language the way it is, because the state doesn't want the school districts to have more golden pennies because they do have to kick in more. And so that's part of the issue.
Okay, thank you.
So there's been a lot of talk and, questions about, how top heavy our district is and whatever else. So let me just talk a little bit about central administration. So this makes up 2.6% of our total budget. And that 2.6 is very, very similar to the districts around us. And all businesses, and we are a business, make no mistake, we have accounting and accounts payable, we have human resources, communications, all districts have, leaders, and businesses have leaders, and legal and payroll, and all these things that are needed for any normal business. And so if we were able to do, cut it in half, that still wouldn't make up for the amount of revenue that we need. Now, whether or not we could provide all these services with half of these folks, we don't think we'd be able to. But the important point to realize that it's 2.6 of our budget, 2.6%, and that is very comparable to the districts around us.
And we've already cut $15 million.
Yeah.
Which was a lot at the central administration.
Right. We have been cutting from that. That's right. And again, so you may have seen this. These are some of the positions that have been reduced. 2 assistant superintendents, executive director of HR, and there's just a number of them. Again, the district, the executive team is looking at every non-campus position that's opened. When we have folks leave the district, we're looking at those every Monday and trying to decide whether or not we're going to fill those, and we're not filling a lot of them.
I didn't know y'all look at this every Monday.
Every Monday.
Every Monday. Okay, the other thing that I want to make sure that folks understand out there is the longevity pay program. So I think people in Fort Bend County may be familiar with what happened with Lamar ISD last year when they gave $1,000 for everybody. They gave all employees $1,000, and they're using federal funds for that. And we do want to use federal funds for this, but we also want to continue something in the future years that we would use general fund for. And so instead of doing $1,000 for all employees, we're going to do $500 for everybody. Okay, but then we're going to give more to employees based on how much longevity they have with the district. We want to value loyalty, and we're in a teacher shortage across the country, across the state, and we want to prove, we want to show and demonstrate to our employees that it's going to be worth their while to stay in the district, and so that's why we're implementing a program with the longevity pay. So the hard part is the ballot language.
This is the hard part. So when you look at the language, this is required by law. This is not something that we got to choose. So as you can see, the very first few words, ratifying the ad valorem tax rate, is confusing to a lot of people, and rightly so. But it basically is saying of $1.21 in FBISD for the current year, rate that will result in an increase of 7.31%. And that's critical because I'm going to explain that again. It is not an increase, it is to sustain, but they are requiring us to put those words. And it would be in the maintenance and operations section, which is correct, and for the current year, and it would add $47.66 million. Now, if we could write the ballot language where we think it makes sense to average readers, we would say a vote for will keep the same tax rate of $1.21 in FBISD for the current year, a rate that will increase revenue by $47.66 million, and we will use it to fund teacher and staff compensation, additional police officers, and other operational needs identified by the school board. And we know some of that is under special ed. We know some of that is to offset insurance. I mean, we have a plethora of things that we would use it for. That's what we wish we could say, Sherry, but we can't. So hopefully people will look closely at our slideshow and listen to our conversations to help make it clear.
And you voted just the other day in early voting.
I voted the first day.
And it's all the way down.
It's at the very end. Yes, Proposition A.
All right, important dates to know. Early voting has begun. It started Monday, the 24th. It continues until next Friday, November 4th, and then Election Day is November 8th. I just want to ask, some people I think are saying, oh, this would bring $47 million to Fort Bend. What are y'all going to do with all that money? You've outlined many things, but this is a very serious election. This is not like we're going to buy things that are on our wish list.
I think one of the things we didn't talk about in this particular presentation that's critical is we've already cut $15 million. We are committed to cutting another 23 should this pass. And I think, Sherry, what I would want people to know is should this not pass, the reality is we would need to cut another $47 million. And I think that's where the cuts will get deeper and be a lot more challenging.
Yeah, 47 million is a big chunk of change. So
Yes.
this is something that the district is not asking for in any kind of capricious way or
No.
to just do some things that are wish list type things. It's
But
for
we
a lot
do
of
we do
basics.
recognize the fact that everyone needs to get lean, especially after COVID. I think every business has had to really look introspectively to see what is it we can do to work smarter, and so we are doing that, and we're committed to doing that. And I'm grateful to have Steve. I'm grateful for Brian Gwynn, our CFO, and his team, and everyone looking deep as to what can we do to keep it as far away from the classroom as possible.
Okay. Any final words from you, Steve?
No. I mean, what I'm really concerned about is just being able to maintain competitiveness with teacher pay. Okay, we're behind right now, and so we need them. We need quality teachers. That's where the magic happens in the classroom, and so we need to be able to attract and retain the best. And we'll struggle with that if this isn't successful.
And just before we sign off, because I have taken some calls myself from staff members wondering about longevity pay, the pay would be given if this passes in November. Election's
Yeah,
November 8th. The first payment for longevity would show up what paycheck?
Well, it'd only be one payment, but it would be November 30th.
Okay, November 30th. Everyone, no matter how long you've worked for the district, would get $500. And then just some examples. Let's say you've worked for the district 5 years. How much would you get on that November 30th?
Yeah. So if you've completed 5 years, you would get 500 that everybody gets plus an additional 500. Okay.
So that's
you'd
1,000.
You'd get 1,000. So I'll give you another example. Let's say you're 23. If you're 23, you'd get the same 500 that everybody got, but then you get 2,000 more, so you'd get 2,500. And so the next year, well, that person, let's say they completed their 23rd year. Two years later, when they get to the year 25, then they would also receive 2,500 again. So
like
all the
100
milestone years.
Yes.
That's the important part of what we're doing differently than Lamar, is that we're setting something up for payments for folks at those milestone years, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, all the way up. So that's something for them to look forward to. In the district I've been in before, people they've planned their retirement around these payments, and so because it's a big deal, and so they're able to stay longer, and that's the kind of retention that we're going to need.
One call I took said a similar thing, but just to clarify, that first year, everyone gets 500 plus however many years after 5 that you've worked for the district.
Right,
The
right.
second year, only the people who've hit those 5-year milestones get a payment.
Exactly.
Okay, got
We're
it.
looking long-term. We're trying to not just do something for the moment. We're
Right.
trying to take care of people for the moment, but we're also trying to set something up that people can look forward to and plan around as additional compensation for many years to come.
Thank you both, Deputy Superintendent Bassett, Superintendent Whitbeck. I'm Sherry Williams. Thank you all for watching these videos about the VATRE. Please exercise your right to vote now in early voting or vote on Election Day, November 8th. See you next time.